So welcome everybody to our Microsoft 365 webinar series. The goal of our series is to help companies understand how to leverage the power of Microsoft 365 to solve business issues. And to Kathy's point, or someone's point, Claudia's point earlier, a lot of companies were already paying for the software and want to take advantage of it versus buying new software, and we fully support that. So if you're new to joining us, the way we do this is we do a 20-minute topic and we kind of hit it hard, and then we open it up for Q&A, but feel free to be entering in any of your questions along the way in the chat, and I'll monitor that along the way. But we usually do kind of content and then go into the Q&A at the end. We have been doing this webinar series for over 3 years since the pandemic started. And with me today is one of our amazing team members, Arnie. Arnie comes from the business world. He's definitely more of a business process improvement guy who fell in love with SharePoint and then subsequently fell in love with Teams. So he's a great asset to our organization and helping our clients look at what are their biggest business issues and how do we solve them with technology. So today our topic is a very specific one. It's around supplementing a piece of software called Redtail, which is a customer relationship management tool, and how to supplement that tool with Microsoft 365. And we thought this would be a good topic today because there's so much opportunity to supplement all different types of software. And in fact, the case study we're going to cover today super quickly is a really good example of that as well. So even if you're not using Redtail, just open your minds to the possibility of, what might SharePoint fill a void? Where might it fill a void for your organization is a good way to look at the conversation today. And I'm going to enter into the chat a bunch of links. And okay, let me get that in there, a bunch of links. So today we're going to be talking about the Redtail supplement. And then next month, Nancy, one of our other team members, is going to be talking about what's changing with Microsoft Stream. Stream is Microsoft's video tool. So she's going to tell a little bit about what the tool is and what's changing and what's different. So in the links I sent you, there's an opportunity for you to sign up for that, for registering for that for next month. Also a link to sign up for our newsletter where you can find out about all the upcoming webinars that we have and a chance to register through the newsletter. And then we've got the case study and then a couple other links in there. So check that out, like our YouTube channel. So I'm going to cover a couple slides quick and then Arnie's going to take the floor from me. So again, our goal is really to help companies solve business issues by using Microsoft 365. We don't come in and immediately say, hey, this is awesome tech, you should be using every piece of it. It always has to stem from what's a pressing business issue, what are we trying to solve? And the list here is typically the list that we pay attention to when we listen. And if we hear our clients saying they have any of these issues, where it's an organization problem, communication issue, we typically know 365, there's going to be an option in there that's going to help solve those problems. And we often joke that when any of these things are not working, there's most companies have death by meetings, because if everybody's not communicating effectively, they call a meeting, or they're not collaborating effectively, they call a meeting. So these tend to be the business issues that we can solve with Microsoft 365. And today is a good example of it as we get into it on Arnie, what would you say in the CRM today? It's kind of organization of information, collaboration with multiple team members, kind of hits those two buckets, don't you think?
Yeah, it's just, if you get away from the Redtail angle, it's just managing work group, workflow, task flow.
Yeah, a good way to look at. Perfect. Go ahead, Arnie. Yeah, perfect. So Microsoft 365 got a lot of attention when the pandemic hit. We were super lucky that that technology existed, but it still continues to be a massively important tool, certainly for the hybrid and remote environments, but even for companies that are 100% back in the office, because there's always going to be the parent with the sick kid and they didn't plan for it and they all of a sudden have to work from home and they still have access to everything because they're on 365. So we're noticing trends in what's going on with the workforce, but 365 is a great solution for all of those. And all right, I'm going to do a case study really quickly, and the link to the full case study is in the link in the chat. So what typically happens, and this is actually what happened with the CRM as well, is I'm often in coaching a leader, a CEO within an organization, And while I'm coaching them to figure out how they can be more productive, we spot that there's an opportunity for them to leverage tech. So in this particular case, I was coaching the head of sales, the head of engineering, and the head of manufacturing in this company. And they were constantly being interrupted, and they had so many inefficiencies because of this one particular area. So we suggested that they allow us to build out this solution, and you'll see the results. So what was happening is sales and engineering were having some challenges. From the engineering management side, they really couldn't figure out and get their arms around resource planning. It was really hard to find information. They had to read through emails to figure out who was doing what. They had a great term they used. They said, Jan, we need a supervisor portal. So we need a way of not looking at just each individual project, but we need to be able to see the whole, the whole mix of projects and who's doing what. And they found that scope change on their projects was very difficult.
And I'm putting technology, sorry.
Oh, you are, that's okay.
Okay, there we go.
No problem. So again, I hinted to this a second ago. In their particular case, they had an awesome ERP tool that did amazing things, right? It was really good at financial planning, materials management, a lot of different things, but we couldn't get it to be sufficient for their reporting needs. And they really needed the ability to manipulate data. So just like the webinar that we're doing today, we built out a solution to supplement their ERP. And so that's really what we did for them. And the benefits overall is they now can actually schedule projects based on true availability and capacity versus a gut feel. It streamlined the whole project management process. It gave them transparency to all the other departments on who's doing what, and it pulled all that information together so they could really leverage the information to make decisions. The benefits for the engineering management was they had definitely a much better resource management tool, and we were building out data so they could be doing better forecasting for future projects. So it has very many long-term benefits as well. The benefits for the engineer, I love this first bullet point. They were happy and empowered. That is one of the things we love about what we do, is when you help companies run efficiently, everybody's happier. So we love that that was part of their quote in this case study. They love that they could have their own personal view of the data, not be overwhelmed by too much information. They could get alerts to notify them when it was their turn to be doing something. Lots of personal benefits, just engineers. From a sales perspective, they could have a much faster response to their customers. They had much more accurate information, and it improved internal communication because we moved everything that was happening in email into more appropriate tools within SharePoint. Overall, the cost of the project was $58,000. In this particular project, we did a lot more than just tech. We actually looked at roles and responsibilities, documented their workflow, non-techie stuff, documented the end user screening images, and there was a lot going on there. The great thing about SharePoint is there's no ongoing cost. It's one-time project cost, so you don't have a subscription fee with bringing in other software. That certainly adds up over time. And we always like to pull out one little nugget where we calculate a true ROI. And so what happened is the sales reps, there were 4 sales reps, and they would roughly spend about a half hour a day trying to track down the status of projects to give customers updates. And we shrunk that from a half hour down to 5 minutes a day. And so when you extrapolate that over a year, they now have 54 more days to sell because of leveraging technology. And the timeline for the project was 4 months. So anyway, just hopefully it gives you some ideas other than even the webinar today on how you might use Microsoft 365. So Arnie, I think you're up.
I am up. Hi, everybody. Welcome, Nancy. I see Nancy just joined. Another members, but yeah, hey, it's been a rough week. I worked on this presentation in my cabin in the woods, which has no internet or electricity, over the weekend, and worked on it about an hour and a half, cleaning it up, adding some really cool graphics. And oh my gosh, you should have seen it. It was beautiful. But then when I shut my computer, I heard a terrible noise coming from inside the computer, and I was unable to get on internet to where my PowerPoint could be backed up. My computer just died. So I say that number one is, oh, you should have seen the PowerPoint I had ready. But number two is thank goodness for 365, because while I panicked and I hated, I love that computer. I hope it's fixable. I haven't heard yet, but my stuff was not lost. It was saved up in the cloud, and So, I panicked at first, but I thought, all is not lost. I lost 90 minutes probably of work on this PowerPoint, but 365 saved me. In the old days, we would have had to cancel this. And as it is now, you just have to look at a PowerPoint presentation that is not as good as the one that got away.
It's all right, Arnie.
So anyway, and by the way, Jan mentioned it too. This is about replacing a module or supplementing Redtail. Some of you may not use Redtail. Doesn't matter. Because as you probably, if you've watched any of our recent webinars, there's been a common theme. And whether it's Redtail, Maximo, Salesforce, whatever those specialty softwares are that you use, the common theme has been replacing expensive third-party software. Now, of course, you're not going to get rid of Salesforce. You're not going to get rid of Redtail. If, as I understand it, Redtail is a financial kind of CRM that's pretty much indispensable to those who use it. But there may be other third-party softwares that you pay for, in the thousands of dollars per year, perhaps, or, per user fees. As Jan and I were talking before this started, with SharePoint, which is my favorite Microsoft 365 app, you can essentially build your own software. So it's worth looking at some of the things you're paying for and asking, could SharePoint replace this? And a lot of times, if I tell clients back in the corporate days, I would tell managers and VPs, hey, if we can replace 80% of that functionality, would you be happy to offload that cost? And oftentimes, you don't use all the modules in a third-party software anyway. So it's worth looking at whether you end up replacing it or not. But today we're focusing on supplementing third-party software. I call it third-party software. Some call it niche or niche software. Regardless, it's those things that you run your business with that are not Microsoft usually. So, sometimes within, in this example, Redtail, and I don't know, I've never used Redtail, just had clients who do. I don't know if it doesn't have a module to do what we're going to discuss today, or if it has one and it's not user-friendly or it's clunky. In the early days of software or SharePoint, I think it was 2004, maybe 2005, when I was in the corporate world, worked for the biggest electric utility in the country. And they had this, we had this mega software. I don't know how many millions it cost for the company, but it was asset management, work management tracking and such. But there's this process called lockout tagout, and it's to keep people from getting killed when they stick their hands into the wiring of a humongous pump and such. It's to remove the electricity or the pressure, whatever. And they struggled with doing that. They had a paper process because the module in the software it was too much trouble, not worth teaching people how to use it. They needed something else, and that was my first attempt at replacing a module in a software with SharePoint. And let's see, that's been 18 years ago. And last I heard, they are still using it exactly how I built it. I wish they would improve it, but it has had hundreds of thousands of lockout tagout requests tracked through it. And SharePoint has saved them so much heartache in that aspect, so much work. So supplementing Redtail with 365. So we didn't set out to supplement Redtail. This was a case where this 3-person financial services company said, hey, we suspect 365 will improve our processes. We don't know how. That's why we're paying you. Come in, please look at our processes. So we looked through their email burden, which is a great way to start. Find those repetitive emails, those emails where you get the same file over and over and over, and those just scream, hey, streamline this process with SharePoint. So we found that, I don't remember the percentage, but it was a huge amount of these 3 ladies' inboxes were full of the same type of emails over and over and over. And they were, well, 2 types, but they're kind of similar. And the first one was client transactions. And again, I don't remember. I assume it was moving money around, buying mutual funds, or whatever y'all do in the financial services industry. But their inboxes were full of emails such as this. Difficult to track. Every transaction was in its own siloed container, and it wasn't easy to track status. And then also the emails included client activities, things such as updating email addresses, updating physical addresses, changing beneficiaries, got married again, new addresses, but regardless, one after another. So you can imagine what their inboxes look like all the time. Just tons of emails. When someone would complete one, I don't know what they did. I think they probably just either deleted email or they may have replied, hey, this is done, whatever. But, in my opinion, emails are just evil. It's
not evil, it's abused.
Is that, yeah, okay. I'm not a fan of email, and if I can find a way to get rid of email, I will. And oh, by the way, if you use Teams, you should, this is just a plug for Teams. You should not have internal email. You should use Teams. So, but that's for another day. So anyway, all the status, all the details on these transactions were in all of these individual emails. And oh, by the way, every time an email is sent, that email is in all three people's inboxes. It's more clutter. And so what happens at the end of the day is, they had this backlog of client transactions, client account changes that need to be made, a whole lot to get their arms around. And as I understand it, Redtail just didn't have a way to get their arms around it. So there was this constant thought in the back of their heads, are we getting everything done? Is there anything falling through the cracks? Waking up in the middle of the night saying, oh, did I finish that transaction that I was asked to? You know how that uncertainty kind of weighs you down. SharePoint is good at giving you an overview of repetitive activities. And here's an example. Here's what we did to stop them from brute forcing their way through that process. And that's a term back from my corporate days. If somebody was just working their tails off without a good process, we said they were just brute forcing their way through the process. So they were right in suspecting there was a better way. So here's what we did. And I have covered SharePoint lists and dashboards in several previous webinars if you want to go have a look at them. So I'm not so much telling you how to do it. I'm just showing you how to apply SharePoint lists and dashboards, which are actually called pages in SharePoint admin lingo. But we replaced all of those individual emails with this dashboard where on a single web page now they can look and quickly see where everything stands. And the goal of the two ladies who did performed all of these transactions, updated the client's accounts. Their goal at the end of the day, they generally didn't get there, but their goal was to, let's see how empty we can get this page. We've had a good day when there are no transactions on this transaction dashboard. So way fewer clicks than using email. So, and it simply worked this way in that if generally it was the lady who I think she owned the office, she was a CEO, but regardless, she was one who generally initiated new transactions. So in the old days, she would click new email in Outlook. Well, we changed a little bit to where now she clicks new transaction on the dashboard, and that pops up a form that gets the information that's absolutely necessary for the other two ladies to conduct these transactions and to see them through the whole workflow. So, client name, which fund needs to be bought or sold, whatever, the amount and the status. And then it moves its way down this page until finally, when it's complete, it falls off the page altogether. So, and if a client calls in and says, hey, I have an address change, any of the three could click the new client activity. It pops up another form. what type of activity type is this? What's the client's name? And then that's a long text form there where you can fill in all of the details to finish out the account change. And here's that list. And if I expand in this example, the in progress, there are 2 in progress. So I know I need to move these forward. I need to change their accounts. So back to the dashboard, we also, and I didn't show those here, but we also created a funds and sponsors list. And I do show the funds list here. And this is just one of the ways a SharePoint list can group the information. And if you notice, it looks a whole lot like Excel. That's because it's closely related. SharePoint lists are, I like to say, Excel on steroids. It's browser based. It's just way more palatable to your end users, your employees. But if I click on, for this example, if I click on that second sponsor there, there are the funds. And forgive me if any of this is not exactly like, I had to do a lot of this from memory because the lady was on vacation when I tried to get back and see what we built, and I no longer had access to their system. So I did some of this from memory. And if you haven't noticed, I got some Latin on there that I copied and pasted from the internet just to have some text. So that's an example of a grouping in a view of a list. So can't do that in Excel. So we streamlined that quite a bit, but the biggest thing was, well, there were 2 things. They can now see the status of all transactions on a single page. I call them dashboards. That not only makes oversight easier, but it prevents work from falling through the cracks. Hopefully keeps them from waking up in the middle of the night, worrying that they're not getting everything done. So just that relief of that mental burden of wondering where everything stands, because as I understood it in the old days, if they wanted to see where some things stood, they could go and click on individual transactions and all and see where it is, or they could look in the emails and hope there's a reply. But regardless, single page status of everything. And here's a biggie. They eliminated 30 hours of email management a week, and they were pretty happy about that. But when you calculate that, it's a savings of 3/4 of an FTE, or if you don't know what an FTE is, it stands for full-time equivalent. It's an employee, 3/4 of their daily work. So that's pretty large, especially in an office of 3, because if you do more calculations among 3 people and 3/4 of an FTE, that amounts to 25% of their office work time. They can reallocate that to developing new business, reaching out to clients more often, taking better care of them. Regardless, I like to say they can go do their next higher importance task. So the more repetitive, not that it was low value, but when they spend time managing all those emails, they can reallocate that to things that make more money. And let's face it, in this day and age, when resources are limited, you can't always get someone leaves your office, you can't quickly replace them in a lot of cases. So if you're having a hard time hiring good help, or someone retired, whatever, reduce the burden on your remaining employees. And maybe you don't have to hire a new employee so quickly. Oh, and by the way, this is not a picture of the lady who ran the office. That's just a paid actress, because I found these really cool tools that let you put people in PowerPoint. You should have seen the one that got away. So, in wrapping it up, the main takeaway from this, whether you use Redtail or not, you could customize 365 to replace expensive software, and you can supplement less than perfect but necessary software such as Redtail. Remember, I'm a huge fan of SharePoint, and sometimes I think, are people thinking, well, Arnie, you recommend SharePoint for everything, and I guess maybe I do often, but why they say if you have a hammer, everything's a nail. But SharePoint is so versatile and can do so much that it does help you streamline a lot of processes. But keep in mind, there are other 365 apps like planner, bookings, shifts, stream that Nancy's going to talk about next month. Those things, the main thing is look at your processes and say, you know, this takes a lot of time, or this is a really important process that we're having failures on. The big question is, how can 365 streamline this process? So I challenge you to look through your business processes, look at those you spend the most time on or are the most frustrated with, and ask your in-house 365 person, what is it that can streamline this? And if you don't have that person, give us a call and let's discuss it. So, you know, if you can save 3/4 of an FTE with such a simple solution as the one we built for this office, that's a no-brainer. So there's my sales pitch for SharePoint 365.
Awesome, Arnie. Good job. So I'll just wrap up quick and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So feel free to start entering any questions you have in chat. And it doesn't have to be about Redtail and this solution. It could be SharePoint. It could be anything with Microsoft 365. But I'm just going to talk really quickly about how we help companies leverage 365. So this is our typical roadmap that we follow, depending on where a company is in the evolution of using 365. Sometimes they've rolled it out and made kind of a mess, and we're coming in and cleaning it out. Sometimes it just needs some tweaking. And sometimes they're not even on it yet. So often we're coming in, assessing, kind of peeking under the hood to look at the infrastructure, the security, the compliance, make sure everything's set up properly. We help migrate everything over, the email, the data, and set up your team's environment appropriately. Arnie steps in a lot in the optimize phase, and Nancy as well, coming in and saying, okay, now how do we leverage the power of this suite of tools? And then we always wrap up. We never want companies to be dependent on us. Our goal is really to come in, develop the solution, and then train their team to understand how to maintain and support. And that's very much what Arnie did with this solution, was train their internal people so they could continue to tweak it. So that's a little bit about how we work. I think our secret sauce, quite honestly, is how we help with the adoption of Microsoft 365. It has a lot to do with the way we approach training. We certainly do a lot of group training, but we always recommend you start with a pilot, figure out how you're going to use the tool. We do group training. We always recommend one-on-one training. There's a lot of people that need just a little bit of a personal help to get over that hurdle of moving away from email. We always recommend you create what we call rules of engagement. It's basically your operations manual for how you're going to use Microsoft 365. If you've been tinkering with 365, you may know it's very open, the way it's given to you. And it's important that and there's a million ways to do lots of different things. So it's important to come up with the way your company is going to use it. So we offer advice and guidance on the best ways to do certain things within 365. And it's really a cyclical process of helping with adoption. So as we roll out, we're training and holding people's hands and refining the operations manual. So that's a little bit about how we work with 365. Just a reminder again, the webinar next month is going to be on what's changing with Microsoft Stream. And that is, and I'll just enter all the links again into chat, so you could register for that if you want. So Stream again is the video tool within Microsoft. And I think we're ready for Q&A. So Arnie, I'm not seeing any questions come through, and it kind of makes sense. It's, again, a very specific piece of software, but feel free if you have any questions at all about SharePoint or Microsoft 365, we'd love to answer any of those questions if you have any. I don't see any questions. I think that some of the things that I'm noticing that's really interesting is, Arnie, you hinted toward it earlier, like a lot of the things that we're building out of SharePoint could have been done 20 years ago. And when I tell clients that, like, what, we could actually built this 20 years ago, I think it makes them feel worse potentially, but it's just important to know companies have really no idea the power of the technology. So it's worth exploring it for sure. So
yeah, Jan, that's true of SharePoint and Teams. Teams has been out now for 6 years. And, you know, I just see it over and over, SharePoint and Teams. Companies are using maybe 5% of the functionality, and truthfully, they're using that 5% poorly. So they're leaving a lot on the table.
Yep, I agree. So, well, if there's no questions, we're good. We hope you got a lot out of it. And please feel free to follow up with me if you've got any questions or want to know more about what we do. And Arnie and I will stay on for a few minutes if anybody has a private question they want to ask, but otherwise we'll go ahead and stop the recording and let you all have some time back in your day. So nice job, Arnie. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
And
Jan.
thanks, everyone. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today. My name is Jan Lehman. I'm the owner of CTC Productivity, and we've been doing these webinars for many years. And so if you want to check out some of our past webinars, you have a couple options. One is you can head over to our website, ctcproductivity.com, and look underneath resources and then webinars, and you'll see all our past recordings we've been doing for the past few years. And there's also a link there then to register for the next upcoming webinar. The other option for you is head over to YouTube and find our CTC Productivity channel, and be sure and subscribe while you're there so you're sure not to miss any other recordings that come out. And if you're curious about our Microsoft 365 services and how we can help you leverage the power of Microsoft 365, feel free to check out information about that service on our ctcproductivity.com website. Just look under areas of expertise and productivity consulting, and we share a little bit about how we work there. And be sure and fill out the contact page while you're there. So yeah, we can set up a meeting and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. So thanks so much. Again, Jan Lehman with CTC Productivity. Have a great day.